Thank you very much for the very kind introduction. Maria and I are very happy to be here to present our activity for the first time in Argentina. We're very excited. We're particularly excited because we came back from an enthusiastic meeting with Silvia, Maria, from Sao Paulo. We had a major international forum in Sao Paulo in collaboration with the Brazilian Ministry of Education and Arts and Center Foundation. We invited 5 ministers of education and 6 vice ministers of education to discuss exactly this topic, how education and skills help promote individual well-being and societal progress. And all the ministers and all the directors of the major education systems, superintendents like Sylvia, we had a great discussion among them, and we came back agreeing that this is a very important issue that we should all pursue over the next years to come. There's a lot of challenges ahead, but we have, I think we recognize that there's enough interest, enough enthusiasms among policymakers, among policy players, and among researchers and teachers, parents, so that we can go ahead with this. So today I will give you a very broad, simple introduction to this project, okay? So that you would understand what this is all about, and maybe you could, so that you could provide some comments, suggestions, or critique, so that we can improve the project, also improve the design of the whole process. So, so I will go through about 30 minutes, the presentation. If there's any questions you have, clarification questions, please let me know. I will try to speak slowly, okay? I'm not a native English speaker myself, so I can't really speak very fast, but yeah, so please let me know if I speak too fast, okay? So.
Y si hay alguna pregunta que le quieran hacer en español, yo con mucho gusto la puedo responder. Si no, aquí hacemos la traducción y que la traduzca Koji, pero sí también hay esa posibilidad.
All right. Okay. So let me start this presentation. Okay. So, well, the title of this project is very generic. Almost any education activity, or including many of the social policy activities, can maybe fit into this sort of title. So I would like to start off with just briefly discussing about the most fundamental issues, most basics, the starting point of the discussion, of the policy discussion in education, which is the purpose of education. I think it's very important to talk about this, because this would naturally allow us to focus on the key topics of this project. So, what is the purpose of education? Maria, I, and my colleagues at the OECD, we did an extensive review of the objectives of education across OECD countries, across partner countries. And we came up with a very general, very common orientations of education. But today, maybe I think it would be very useful to show what are the purpose of education in Argentina. We did our little homework.
Okay, good.
And so from the website, we found a objectives of education, almost like an A to Z list of the objectives of education in Argentina. And of course, I can't put all the details on this PowerPoint. So I just picked up some that we believe are very common across different countries, across different cultures. And we find many, many interesting aspects just by inspecting the education objectives. The goals of education doesn't seem to be only focused on educational outcomes or raising labor market outcomes, reducing unemployment, increasing earnings, but there's a lot of social dimensions in it. to this. There's even a mentioning of health somewhere down here. Yes, there was somewhere.
Drugs, yes. Here.
Drugs, exactly.
Drugs,
yeah. So one aspect that you can find by inspecting the objective is that the most often the goal of the education system is that they care about diverse outcomes for the individual, diverse outcomes for the society. So there's a wide range of outcomes that they would like to shed light on. The second point that we notice when inspecting these documents is that the children's capability, children's characteristics that we believe drive these diverse outcomes tend to also be diverse, right? So the Ministry of Education, teachers, they believe that the kind of skills we need to raise to address education, address labor market outcomes, address health, citizenship, these are actually diverse. And they do not only include cognitive outcomes, but they include diverse social and emotional or non-cognitive outcomes. So these are the common things that we repeatedly find across all the countries, actually, all the countries that we've researched, across different cultures. This is the common aspect, okay? So this is, although this may be very, very common sensual to you, to everybody, but it's very important for us to start off clarifying this point, okay? So this is the goal, at least from the perspective of the educational policymakers. Now, so we know the goals. We know what the policymakers want to achieve. And then, based on that, we reflect whether current or ongoing education policies or practices, do they actually reflect these goals? Are they really oriented towards addressing all these diverse goals? Is current policies or practices, do they really, are they specifically designed to also address health outcomes? These are the questions. Are they also specifically designed to raise social and emotional skills, such as perseverance, self-esteem, all these things? Now, that's one thing I'd like to put on the table. The second point I'd like to put on the table is that, now, I think around this table, I think people believe in the evidence-based policies. But does existing evidence base, do they properly guide our ongoing education policies and practices? That's another question we want to pose. Okay? Since the goals of education has been so diverse, so ambitious, so we need to inspect whether available evidence actually shed light on what we want to achieve. And then the third point, and this is a very important point that leads to what we're trying to do in the future. Do key competencies or skills that matter, are they actually regularly measured so that policy decisions can be improved, so that teachers, parents have regularly this critical information so that they can adapt their teaching styles, so that parents could change their parenting styles to really improve children's skills that matter. So these are the three questions I want to pose at the beginning, and these three questions would guide the presentation that I'm going to make. Okay, so this is like the prologue of what we're going to talk about in our project. Now, before I move on to the main presentation, I can give you some of the answers to these questions, okay? Because we've already discussed these points for OECD, many of the OECD countries and partner countries. I have to tell you that we haven't really inspected these questions for Argentina. So maybe you could tell us afterwards what you think about this. But in most OECD countries, I don't think we found so many countries that would have yes to all these three, okay? all the countries have a very ambitious goal for education, but there's only a few countries in which policies and practices directly address these goals. There's only a few countries that, for which they feel, policymakers feel, there's enough evidence base that would guide their actions. There's only few countries in the OECD economies in which diverse skills that matter are regularly measured. Okay? That's the kind of thing we find when we did the review. And then we would ask our questions, why? Why, although we have a very ambitious, very clear goal for education, why do we not follow this? Why? So one answer could be that, well, maybe the evidence base, right? The scientific evidence base is there, but those evidence hasn't been properly transmitted, communicated to the policymakers, or this evidence base is not properly transmitted to teachers, school administrators, and parents. So there may be some information gap. So it may be a communication issue.
Sorry, Koji, I'm just going to quickly interrupt. Todos saben que es la OCDE, porque asumimos que saben que son los países de la OCDE. La OCDE tiene 34 países miembros, son los países que tienen mayor nivel de desarrollo económico, la mayoría de los países europeos. En Asia está Japón, Corea, Australia, Nueva Zelanda, y en el continente americano, Canadá, Estados Unidos, México y Chile. Esos son los países que conforman los países de la OCDE, y entonces nada más para explicar, porque asumimos que todo el mundo sabe, pero quizás no sepan. Entonces hay 34 países miembros y hay algunos que están en proceso de entrar a esta organización, pero por lo pronto hay 34 y bueno, Argentina no es un país miembro.
Thank you. Yeah, I had sort of, yeah, it's good that you clarify this. But again, so if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to interrupt me. So the second, so the why, it could also be the case that we don't have enough evidence, right? We may not have the information to guide policymakers, teachers, school administrators to optimize policies and practices so that children can best develop skills for life. That may be the case, okay? So here we would have to we would have to carefully inspect or evaluate the state of the evidence base, which I will do in my presentation, okay, in a very synthetic way. So these are the kind of questions that would guide the whole presentation that I will make. So okay, so this is the outline of my presentation. I'll give you briefly the policy environment, the socio-economic context under which this project will take place, and then briefly the objective of this project, the conceptual framework, and synthetic evidence. And then, based on our understanding of the existing evidence base, we would like to propose, we would like to say that evidence base is not really enough. We have to do a lot more than what's available. And hence, that motivates us to launch a new data collection scheme, which we call longitudinal study of skill dynamics. Longitudinal because we're proposing to follow children over time. I'll explain to you this in detail, but we would like to propose the kind of data sets that we believe do not exist in Argentina and in many other countries. It's the kind of data set where you follow children every year, the same children over time, and to assess, measure their skills, diverse set of skills, and to see how these skills change over time, and how teachers' inputs, how parents' inputs, how school input affects the changes or the dynamics of the skill development. Okay? So that's what I'm going to end this presentation with. So let me go through the presentation. First, the policy context. So I don't need to tell you that an important policy context behind this project is that we're facing a considerable and diverse socioeconomic challenges. I'll just give you a few examples. One, of course, the state of the economy, the labor market, is rather problematic, especially after the crisis. But so we know in particular that youth unemployment is a major issue affecting not only the OECD economies, but partner economies. I'm showing you a chart that was produced by the OECD quite recently in Society at a Glance. That's the publication. It shows how youth unemployment, which is the unemployment rate of those aged 15 to 24, is considerably higher. The OECD average, the average among 34 countries, is about 18%. And I checked yesterday evening, so this is very much in line with the youth unemployment in Argentina, about 18.4%, I think. Yeah. So, right. And also that this diamond is the youth unemployment in 2007. Okay, and this bar is the youth unemployment in 2012. You can see that on average it's going up considerably. Okay, so this is one important socioeconomic context that we are in. Another dimension. Let's move on to the more social or non-labor market dimension. We also face a number of health challenges. For example, mental health, depression. This is considerable. In several countries, it's increasing. But here I'm showing you another health challenges, which is the obesity. Okay? Obesity affects the general health conditions. It affects also the well-being of individuals. So obesity of children. Okay, so it captures the children between age 5 and 17. The level of obesity in 34 OECD countries is about 20 to 23%, and that is very high. Right? It hasn't changed so much, but it remains high. Okay, and if you're obese when you're a kid, then you're, of course, much more likely to be obese as adults. And then that would also lead to different types of health problems, like especially heart problems. So this is another challenge that we're facing. And of course, implicit to this is that we believe that skills, cognitive, social and emotional skills can play a role in reducing the magnitude of these challenges. Okay. Another example of the socioeconomic challenges, bullying or violence. I'm not so sure if the issue of bullying in Argentina is a major issue.
Yeah,
okay, so it's also a major issue in OECD countries as well. So approximately 1 in 10 boys get bullied, right? And this is mostly based on self-reports. So I would imagine that the actual bullying rate is much higher than that. Right? So you can see that in fact the bullying, according to the statistics, went down, right? Went down. But there are indications to suggest us that it is probably the nature of bullying that has changed over time. Maybe before it was a physical aggression, and maybe right now it's more the cyberbullying, bullying using the internet or emails could be one source of increase. But anyway, so bullying is another major problem that affects not only the psychological well-being of children, but it would also affect, of course, these children's school performance and how they would make transitions to adults. And lastly, I'm showing you one indicator of civic engagement, which is voting. Okay, voting. But the troubling thing is the trend. It's that it's going down, right? The voting rates is going down considerably over time. Okay. So these are just examples. So we're facing diverse socio-economic challenges, and education and skills could play an important role there. And of course, these diverse socio-economic challenges is one reason why governments is facing budgetary problems with health challenges. The healthcare cost is really affecting the budgetary situations of health ministry. accountable. And governments are, because of that, called upon to be more accountable, right? The health ministry are really pressured to be more and more accountable for the kind of policies and practices that they implement because of these diverse socio-economic challenges, because of these increasing budgetary constraints. Now, the interesting thing is that recently there's been a strong recognition by policymakers, by ministers, by school administrators and the teachers on the potential role education and skills play in addressing diverse socio-economic challenges. For example, let's take obesity. Obesity is traditionally an issue that is handled by the health ministry. The health ministry has a considerable budget to deal with that. Same with mental disorders. But when you look at studies that shows how to, interventions or approaches to reduce obesity, traditional health interventions are, of course, they are effective to a certain extent. But if you look at educational interventions, it appears to be as cost effective as some of the traditional health interventions. So what I'm saying here is that there's a growing understanding that educational approaches or education policies can be considered as part of the health policies or social policies. Okay, so there's a sort of a crossing boundary that is gradually being noticed by different stakeholders. Yeah, so this is what I had mentioned. Okay, so that sets the scene for the for the project. In our project, just to give you in a nutshell, we tried to address these two things. Okay, very broadly. The first objective of the Education and Social Progress Project is we try to find ways to improve the functioning, the efficiency of educational systems in preparing children's future, in preparing children's university graduation, preparing children's labor market performance, and social performance, health performance. We also try, through our project, to find ways to reduce socioeconomic inequalities in education, inequalities in economic and social outcomes. These are the broad goals that we try to address. Okay? So the first one can be addressed in part through a research project, which tries to identify skills that drive, of course, children's socioeconomic outcomes. We can also address this question by trying to identify the school environment, the family environments, or the community environments that drives the development of skills that matter for children's future. Okay? And the second objectives can be addressed through many ways. But what we can do is to try to find out the population groups that has skill deficits that would lead to eventually economic and social inequalities or deficits. We can also try to identify the sensitive periods of the skill development for the type of skills that really matter. Okay? So the question is whether we're really investing in skills at the best timing. It is most often the case that disadvantaged children lack the right stimuli, right intervention during the sensitive periods. So that's one reason why they lag behind, and then that would eventually lead to inequalities. So that's one thing we could also look at. And lastly, I mentioned the importance of the extent to which skills beget skills. I'll get to this point later, but this is the point this is the terminology used by Professor James Heckman. So it is the extent to which the determinants of skills, my skills today, actually depends on my skills yesterday or the year before. So the fact that I have to start with a solid skill basis in order to further develop my skills Okay, so that's the idea of skills beget skills. But I'll get back to that later. So this is objectives. Do you have any questions so far before I move on to the framework? No? Okay. So I'll give you a synthetic view of the conceptual framework that would be useful when interpreting evidence. So at the heart of this project is the skills. Okay, skills. And the way in which we define skills is that skills, we define it in a very loose way. Okay, we define skills that is something to be very productive. It leads to a positive life outcomes for the children. And skills, for us, needs to be malleable. It needs to be changeable. Right? If it's fixed from birth and doesn't change, we don't call it skills. Okay? These are more like traits. Okay? And we also, when we use skills, we limit it to aspects that can be measured as well. And that leads to my last point. So for skills, we consider both cognitive, social, and emotional dimensions. And in our framework, we try to see how these skills components leads to diverse measures of individual measures of social and economic outcomes. Okay? And the other point is that we try to identify the learning context. The learning context, family, school, community learning context that drive the development of skills. So this is really it. This is, to put it simply, this is the framework. And we make an effort to understand what this arrow is. We also make an equal amount of effort to understand what this arrow is, essentially. So just to give you a bit more detail, in our project, we consider skills in a dynamic way. It develops dynamically. I said skill begets skills, which means that a child at age 6 starts with a smaller set of skills, right? And these skills, these foundation skills, leads to another level of skills, right? A child who already has a good solid level of skills can better mobilize investments, for example, intervention programs or pedagogical approaches, and this child can further develop these skills. If this child doesn't have so much solid foundational skills, then this child may not be able to efficiently mobilize investment as much as he or she would have liked to. So we think skill development in a dynamic way, like this. Skills, building on skills as children age of the life cycle. And then these skills would eventually lead to different types of outcomes. Okay? So the skills that are finally accumulated when kids graduate from university will lead to all sorts of different outcomes. But of course, children don't need to wait until graduating from university to demonstrate good outcomes. They can, skills accumulated at age 10 or 15 already leads to different types of positive social outcomes. So, I haven't explained to you what skills really mean so far, and I think I should do that because this is a very important part of this project. So, although we don't consider cognitive and social emotional skills as something distinct, they're actually very well connected. But to make it easier to explain, we put it this way. So cognitive skills. Okay? Cognitive skills, we define it by the individual's mental capacity to acquire knowledge, okay? Thoughts and experiences. Another dimension of cognitive skills is that the capacity to interpret knowledge, to reflect on the knowledge and extrapolate from it based on the knowledge acquired. Okay? And to give you some idea, so we can divide this. So three very important components of cognitive ability. One is the basic cognitive ability, and then the amount of knowledge acquired, and then the extent to which people can extrapolate from knowledge. These are the three, not exclusive, but important dimensions. And this is very much in line with the PISA PISA literacy framework, especially which emphasizes the extrapolation of knowledge, the capacity for individuals to actually extrapolate from the knowledge and apply it in real-life settings. And then I move on to social emotional skills. This is quite difficult to define in an easy to understandable way. But our definition of social emotional skill is the relatively enduring patterns of thoughts, feelings, and behaviors that reflect the tendency of individuals to respond in certain ways under certain conditions. I never managed to get this definition easily conveyed. It's a very technical way of doing it. But I think it's much easier if you understand the situations under which social and emotional skills play an important role. The first situation is when individuals try to achieve goals, okay? Achieve goals. So when individuals try to achieve goals, like getting into a good university, or what they need is the perseverance, self-control, and passion. These are the kind of things that they would need. So this is one important dimension of social and emotional skills. The second situation, which is important, is that when we work and collaborate with others, right? Social and emotional skills play an indispensable role when we collaborate, work with others. So friendliness, respect to others, caring, sounds very soft, but these are very, very important aspects. Okay? And of course, you don't need. I mean, I don't need to tell you this. Everyone knows that these are important. And then the third component of social and emotional skills that are important is when individuals cope. When individuals cope with stressful situations. Right? There are many instances that, of course, we also face, and our capacity to deal with that is precisely an important component of social and emotional skills. So in that situation, calmness, to be able to calm down, optimism, confidence are some of the subcomponents that could help drive emotional coping aspect of individuals. So very briefly, this is the kind of conceptualization that we make. As you may notice, I think traditionally our schooling system, our education system, have been emphasizing a lot these cognitive dimensions, and they should continue to do that. And there's no doubt that this aspect is important. They will do this. Whereas on this dimension, everybody knows that these are important. Ask any parents, ask any teacher, ask any minister. They will all agree that these are important, right? So that's good. But what we're asking is, the extent to which this recognition of this importance is translated into actual policies, practices, measurements. Okay, so that's the kind of question that we'll be posing afterwards. So just to give you a sense of the evidence base, okay, I'll just quickly go through what we've done. Okay? What we've done first is to understand the literature. So we asked some of the best researchers around the world to conduct a literature review for us, right, to give us the best synthetic knowledge. So we asked James Heckman and other colleagues to do that. Now, we didn't stop it here because we thought we could also contribute to bringing in new knowledge. So what we did was to do a review of existing microdata around the world, some of the best microdata around the world, and we conducted our own original econometric analysis of what are the skills that matter, how to develop it. So this is, in short, what we did for 11 OECD countries, and I'll give you a brief synthesis of the results. Okay? So the first synthetic result is cognitive and social and emotional skills are equally important, right? Are equally important in driving education and labor market outcomes. Nothing revolutionary there. Okay. Now, we also find that social and emotional skills are particularly important, perhaps even more important than cognitive, when it comes to social outcomes, when enhancing health outcomes when reducing aggression, crime, bullying, right? In improving individuals' well-being, happiness, life satisfaction. Social and emotional skills play an absolutely important role in social outcomes. And just to show you some of the evidence, right? This is the result. This is the analysis that we conducted using microdata from various OECD countries. What we did was to simulate. So we pick a person who's in the lowest 10% of the skill distribution, and we exogenously shift this person's skill level, just the skill level, to the top 10%. Okay? So we artificially increase the skills, both cognitive and social and emotional skills, and try to see what happens. Okay? And here you can see that, for example, for Norway, if we increase cognitive skills, what happens is that the likelihood of these individuals to be in the high income bracket goes up by 24%. If you exogenously increase social and emotional skills from the lowest 10% to the top 10%, you also increase considerably, 10%, the likelihood of Norwegian kids to be in the high income bracket. And similar results can be found in terms of unemployment. When you increase cognitive skills of these children, unemployment rate goes down by 2.5%. When you increase social and emotional skills of these children, unemployment rate goes down a bit even further, 3%. Right? We systematically get this kind of results. Let's look at obesity, okay? Social outcomes. If we increase cognitive skills in Norway from the lowest 10% to the top 10%, the likelihood of this child to show BMI higher than 30, which is the indicator of obesity, is 8% lower. Right? Whereas if you increase the social and emotional skills, in which case they use confidence, it goes down even further, about 16-17%. So the effect is quite big, actually. If you exogenously if you manage to find a way to increase skills, then many of these economic and social indicators improve. That's what we find. Same with depression, same with conduct problems like delinquency, bullying, antisocial behavior. You can see the red bar appears to dominate. The blue bar is significant, but the red bar, which is the impact of social and emotional skills, is very big. Okay? So these are the systematic findings that we get. This is victimization. And this is for life satisfaction. Okay? And the evidence that I have presented is very much in line with the literature. Okay? So I think we're quite well. Maybe I shouldn't say satisfied, but it is very much in line with the literature. And I'll just show you one more graph. So this graph shows what happens if we move the social and emotional skills from the lowest 10% to top 10%, right? This is the deciles of self-confidence, right? So as we move up people's level of self-confidence, the likelihood of reporting obesity goes down considerably, okay? Right? So this is quite straightforward. And the interesting thing is that there's no threshold effect, right? It continuously goes down, actually. It continuously goes down. Even at the end, even at the bottom end, there is an effect, okay? And the way we had estimated this is that we took care of measurement errors and all those econometric problems, and so we could this at least we claim has a certain amount of causal inference behind it. Okay. So another important evidence that comes out from the literature and from our work is the answer to the question of which social and emotional skills are important, right? So I can say social and emotional skills are important, but then people ask me, so which one? right? There are many different types of social emotional skills. And the literature generally suggests that conscientiousness stands out. What does conscientiousness mean? It means being responsible, being dependable, caring, organized, and persistence. Again, this is very much common sense, right? Again, I'm not saying something new. Everyone would agree to this. And conscientiousness matters for diverse domains of socioeconomic outcomes, and it outperforms the predictive power of cognitive ability in many of them, actually. Okay? The scientific evidence. Now, so far I've shown you that social and emotional skills matter, but if it can't be changed, maybe there's no so much point in having this argument. So fortunately, the evidence suggests that there's a considerable room to change social and emotional skills. Social and emotional skills are malleable, and that there are sensitive periods, particularly sensitive periods. The sensitive periods for cognitive ability tends to be early. That I think most of you already know, hence the importance of early childhood investment. But the sensitive periods for social and emotional skills seems to be much later. I'm showing you a very interesting figure on the trends in conscientiousness over time. Okay, this comes from an internet survey from many different countries, covering many different countries and different cultures. Large scale sample. What this chart shows that for women, there's a considerable fluctuations and changes in the level of dependability, reliability of so that's conscientiousness over time. Okay. So, especially around the adolescence, you have erratic changes in conscientiousness, and then even after 20, 30, 40, 50, continues to increase over time. So I also have a chart for men. Right? So I don't know if you can guess where that would lie, above or below. Yeah, so unfortunately, this is the answer. So men appears to be consistently low in the dependability and reliability over time. There's only one tiny period when we catch up with women. So
there's no catch up.
There's no catch up, exactly, and then we diverge. So just this suggests, this is just a suggestion that conscientiousness, some of the social and emotional skills that are very important, it actually changes over time. It changes probably through some biological changes, right? Biology and environmental interactions. But it may change. It could change also due to some interventions or some learning inputs, the kind of input that I receive from teachers, from schools, from my parents. That could be a source of change. But just to give you an idea that...
Koji, just a second. Yeah. We have a question over there, responding.
I can wait for the...
okay.
Is that okay?
Yes.
Okay. But this is just an illustration, okay? So, yeah. So the second very important point is that the sensitive period, the period during which social and emotional skills can be enhanced, appears to be much longer and later. So, and what the evidence suggests is that when you want to really change social and emotional skills, you could start early. There's no problem with that, of course. Parents should start investing in children's perseverance and all that early. But you can still change. You still have an influence on social and emotional skill, even throughout in adolescence. Whereas, although for the cognitive part, the sensitive period seems to be rather narrow, relatively speaking. It doesn't mean it can't be done, of course, but it's more difficult to do after you go beyond the sensitive periods. Another important findings that we gather is that So the question is how to actually raise these social and emotional skills. So the common features of successful programs to raise social and emotional skills, they have certain common characteristics. One is that they require not only parental, well, actually they require different types of inputs. Parental inputs from home, but also school inputs. And there are also signs that community inputs also help. So diverse learning environment matters in raising social and emotional skills. Another important findings we find is that attachments, right? The tight connection between parents and children, or teachers and students, or mentors and the person working under the instructors are very important to promote attachments. And I've already mentioned the mentoring features. So maybe this may sound very, very consensual as well. But again, the literature suggests that these are indeed some of the important drivers of raising social and emotional skills. Okay, so in summary, what we found out through a literature review and also our own empirical analysis is that we find out they are actually quite informative. It is in line with our intuitions, right? With the intuition we have. But unfortunately, the impression that we got, Maria, me, and the team in Paris, we thought that the existing evidence isn't sufficient. It doesn't provide us with a detailed information about what exactly is the nature of the interventions or learning context that works. What works for whom? Does particular parenting approaches, does particular teaching approaches work better for disadvantaged children, but not really for other children? So there are many, many detailed questions that policymakers need to know before they can actually implement these programs and policies in large scale. That's the kind of impression we get after looking at this evidence. So we need better data to really give useful information to policymakers. We also believe that so we not only need better microdata, but we also thought for this kind of work, it will be useful to have an internationally comparable data across countries, so that the Japanese could learn from successful experiences in France or in Argentina, or other countries could also learn from non-successful experiences in other countries. I think internationally comparable data is very useful in many ways, but including that. And hence, that's the reason why we've decided to launch a completely new data collection scheme, which we call OECD Longitudinal Study of Skill Dynamics. Right? This is the future of our work. And I'll end my presentation with giving you a snapshot of what we're proposing. So what we're proposing is to randomly pick, let's say, 100 schools in Tokyo, in Ottawa, Canada, in Rio de Janeiro, and in hopefully Buenos Aires. Right? So randomly pick 100 schools and focus on grade 1 and grade 7. And then we measure all the kids in these 100 schools, all the kids in grades 1 and 7, and follow them every year, over time. And we assess cognitive skills that I'm sure you already do. And we also assess sort of diverse elements of social and emotional skills over time. That's what we're planning to do. We plan to spend until 2016 to prepare this major longitudinal study. And then by the end of 2016, or early 2017, we plan to launch this across many different countries. We're proposing the survey to be delivered at schools, but we would also like to know what happens at home. So questionnaires that goes to parents are also very important to capture if the learning environment at home is consistent with the learning environment at schools. For this initiative, we are focusing on major cities like Buenos Aires, like Tokyo, like London, right? But we also give the option for countries to choose a national coverage or state level coverage. That's also quite nice. We ask countries to commit at least 3 years so that we could really beneficiate from the longitudinal aspect of this data. And maybe I haven't said that. So outcome measures, we're interested in, as you may know, not only educational outcomes, labor market outcomes, but also diverse social outcomes. Those are very important. So this is our future in a nutshell. Just to give you a sense of how negotiation is going through. So far we have commitment from Tokyo, Seoul, Korea. Okay. In Europe, we have commitments from, well, not precisely Europe, but Russia. Well, it is. Yeah. And we have been making advanced negotiation with these 3 countries as well, Norway, Finland, and Italy. We're also currently negotiating with the Greater London Authority. They're also very interested. London is also very interested in our study. And then in the Americas, from the top, we have Canada, Ottawa, the capital, committed. After this trip, after this discussion, Maria and I will go to Mexico to further negotiate with how many states?
Well, 3, 4. 3,
4 states, okay. And then we've advanced our negotiation with Rio. And then, so we hope to eventually make some progress with Argentina, Buenos Aires. And this is really our hope. And so then this is one of the reasons why we wanted to receive your feedback, so that we can design our study that would meet your needs, meet your expectations. So that's part of the reasons why we are having these discussions. So lastly, just a timeline. So we're spending until end of 2000, well, I would say bit of 2016 in preparation stage. There's a lot of work to do in finalizing the longitudinal data design and choosing the right questionnaires, right questions to ask children, right questions to ask teachers and parents. And then the main data collection starts from 2016 onwards. Okay. So, and there are many different meetings in between. So this is essentially the end of my presentation. I do hope that I have some of the key points for my presentation. One is that any country that we've studied, any country emphasizes the importance of addressing educational, labor market, and diverse social outcomes through education. Okay. However, it's not so clear. It's not so clear if policies and practices are really optimized to address these goals. Now, we feel that it is partly to do with information gaps, that policymakers, teachers, parents don't have a sufficient amount of information to guide them to change the way they deal with children. We also suspect that the existing evidence base isn't good enough. We really need to improve it. And that is the reason why we're proposing a new type of data collection that would directly address this question. Okay? So thank you very much.